Ladies and gents, hello and welcome. My name, of course, is Potato. At the start of the episode, you saw a whole bunch of my failures on my mission to get to the moon, but it's okay. We do succeed. Spoilers, and I'm a way to show you how it is done. This is the craft in which we are using. This is the Grumpage Mark III, and this thing is absolutely enormous. It is fantastic. I love it, and it's kind of complicated, actually, at least for an idiot like me. The problem that I ran into the first 5 or 6 times that I actually tried to get to the moon is that my Kerbals would just stop working. You know, after a period of about 7 days, they would just stop working. And it took me a hell of a long time to figure out why that was the case. And eventually, I found out that it was due to one of the life support mods that I had installed, or the life support mod that I had installed. Basically, I wasn't carrying enough food and poo storage for them. So I rectified that by adding a tiny little module just underneath the command pod. You can see it, it's just there. That has the a few more supplies for them so that their journey isn't as terrible. Anyway, that didn't really work out, so we kind of just adapted as we went, and this is kind of what happened. Launch was fine. You can see, by the way, that life support window gives you a little rundown. It's really, really cool. I don't quite understand how it works, but basically, if it's red, then it's bad and it's going to run out. If it's orange, then that shows you how long you've got. We've got loads of supplies. We've got loads of everything. What we don't have enough of is mulch space. And mulch is basically, you know, Kerbal poo. It's Kerbal shit, you know? So we don't really have enough space for mulch. And I think that was the problem with this design. But hey-ho. Anyway, we just needed to get into a lovely little orbit to start things off, because that's all we need to do is a nice, simple, circular orbit that's not too confusing for an idiot like me. Now, it was a little bit weird to work with this life support mod, because even though we do have that, you know, that pod behind the command pod, or that little bit of supply storage behind the command pod, it wasn't enough. So what I went and did is I went and researched something called a recycler, and that's the thing that I'm just hovering over right now. And this theoretically should have turned Kerbal shit into edible supplies. But for the life of me, I could not figure out how it worked. We had the electric charge, we didn't have mulch, but we try it later on and it still worked about as well as it did the first time. And it just didn't want to work. So that basically meant that my moon adventure was hard capped to 7 days, right? So we have basically had 7 days worth of shit storage to work with, right? So we are quite limited. Quite limited by the fact that the Kerbals poo an awful lot, which is kind of ridiculous when you think about it, but by golly it is. Anyway, yes, so here is me fiddling around with the maneuver nodes, and I basically had to upgrade the mission control and also the tracking station in order to get this, these maneuver nodes. Because, quite frankly, it would be utterly impossible for me to do this without the aid of those maneuver nodes. And that is actually because on Gael, the Space Center is not... does not allow to... it's not on the equator, so it doesn't allow you to get into an equatorial orbit with much ease. So, whereas in, you know, the base Kerbal Space Program, it's a heck of a lot easier to get into an orbit around the equator and then just head to the moon. It's not quite as easy to do that in this game. So maneuver nodes were an absolute must, and plus I'm terrible at the game anyway, so these maneuver nodes are really, really helping me out. Anyway, we need to do a little bit of a cheeky burn in order to get to where we need to go. It's about a 20-second burn, so it's not that big of a deal, but we overshoot in classic potato style, and so we have to burn in the other direction, but thankfully it all goes absolutely swimmingly. Now, the problem with traveling through space for a hell of a long period of time is twofold. One, our mulch does increase, as you can see, or as you will be about to see, as we zip through space. Also, another problem, which I did account for to a degree, our electric charge starts to diminish. And that is, that is more so the case if we have the recycler on. And that's why I turned the recycler off before we began our long period of travel through space. Now, we actually do manage to get an encounter with Iota. I am super, super happy that we managed to get this. We're collecting a whole bunch of science from Iota, and I'm actually really, 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 really happy with the way that it went. It was surprisingly difficult to get to this point. It took me a lot of effort, a lot of patience, but we finally did it. Now, this is another problem that we're running into. Whereas usually, I would just wait, I'd perhaps go around the planet, and then burn at apoaps to bring periaps down. That would be the most efficient way of doing it. We can't actually do that in this instance, so we have to burn inefficiently just after apoaps in order to bring our periaps down, because otherwise, we run into that problem that we had at the very start. We have a fuel shortage. A fuel shortage? No, we have a food shortage. Anyway, here is the journey back. I thought I'd make it into a little bit of a ditty. So yeah, enjoy. That was that. Kerbal poo did not stop me from encountering the moon and making it back safely, albeit very, very, very close to disaster, but thankfully we made it back. We did it. I was super, super, super happy when we finally did it. Honestly, playing around with the food, it was a real limitation. It really, really was, but I'm absolutely over the moon that we actually managed to do exactly what we said we were going to do, and as such, get big money. Anyway, this is what we're going to be doing next. We need to try and get ourselves into a polar orbit, and it's actually going to be remarkably difficult, which is why you just saw me upgrade the vehicle assembly building. We can do that because we just made big bucks from encountering Iota. Anyway, this is going to be not a new generation of craft, so to speak, but kind of a new generation, I suppose. It's still going to be the Grumpage class because it's still an orbital vessel. That nothing has changed in that regard. But it is going to be the first craft to do a heck of a lot of things, actually. It is going to be the first craft that will use a probe core. So this is going to be the first unmanned unmanned ship that we are ever going to be launching. Very, very cool indeed. And I made it 200% there, so it doesn't look super stupid, even if it is going to weigh a little bit more, so I thought that might be kind of nice. This is also going to be the first craft that will actually have a fairing, and in that fairing, a payload. Also, it'll be the first craft to use radial parachutes, I guess, if that's a feature that's cool, but that's not really as interesting as having a payload, is it? Anyway, the mission at hand is one in which we need to place a little satellite into polar orbit at specific coordinates above Kerbal. Not Kerbal, Gael. And this is the satellite that we are currently manufacturing. Now, at the time, I thought, hey, yep, let's put a ScanSat thing on so we can actually, get some good data from this adventure. But it turns out not to really work as well as intended. But yeah, we'll talk about that a little bit later. We also put a brand new antenna that we've got going on. So that's there. We've also got a couple of little solar panels that we've recently unlocked in the research tree, and a little bit of scientific equipment under here to go with it. Now, later on, I do actually revise this, and I do actually put a little decoupler underneath that entire operation. I try to use that decoupler, but it turns out to be a little bit crappy. So I used another decoupler later on. Here's the radial parachutes going on. Perfect. That's grand. And also I make a little revision, I think, to change the engines. Yes, I update the engines because I forgot to do that on camera. And I think I also changed that big solid rocket booster in the middle to be a liquid rocket booster. So that's the changes that I made off camera, but those are the ones that are there. There's fins also on this thing as well. So there we go. Anyway, launch goes completely smoothly. And I'm not going to lie to you, this is an operation that took a great amount of learning and practice and a whole heck of a lot of tries. It really, really did. But once I got the hang of it, it was actually rather straightforward. We basically need to just, fire the rocket up, and then we need to aim directly north. That's pretty much what we want to do. We want to create an orbit that goes over, one and both of the poles, actually, 'cause it's a polar orbit. And this, in real spacecraft applications, this is the best of the best in terms of orbits, because it covers the entirety of the planet. Every little scrap of planet will eventually be covered by your rocket. So that was my logic for deploying the ScanSat to this craft. Anyway, after a little bit of fiddling around with maneuver nodes, I still have yet to master these things, but eventually, one day, I might be able to get them. I'm aiming to try and get my maneuver node, the maneuver node that I'm working with. I want to try and get that to intersect the proposed route for the satellite, and I get it kind of close. I'm not super happy with it, but we only need to get it close-ish, because you'll see what happens as soon as we make the burn. But yeah, close-ish is good enough. It's not really that big of a deal. We also have a second contract, by the way. The second contract is to transmit or keep some data from space, so it's not really that big of a deal to do. But we give it a best shot. We're gonna make this burn, and we're gonna try and get to a much higher orbit around the planet Gael. And it's very successful, actually. It's very, very successful. With these brand new big engines, we can really perform much more aggressive burns, and more bang for your buck in terms of the fuel that you're taking up into orbit. But anyway, yes, we get kind of close to the suggested orbit, and I'm not super happy with it, but it's okay. After that, we want to circularize our orbit so that we can get into an orbit that is similar to the orbit that is suggested. And that's me just doing a little bit of research, transmitting it, sending it back home, keeping it, whatever. I can't remember what I was doing. And then once we reach the top, we make the burn to the orbit that will circularize us and get us in line with the suggested orbit. This is a super, super easy burn. It's very, very short, doesn't take that long at all, and boom. Suddenly, it's looking pretty damn good. Now, the last burn that we need to make is a burn that we need to make on the actual orbit itself. So, since we've got an orbit that is basically identical to the one that is being suggested to us, we basically find a point where the two routes intersect, and then we burn along that point, and we line the two routes up. And I think that the game will give you a fair bit of give and take, so we don't need to make it super accurate, but we make it as accurate as we possibly can, and I'm very, very happy with the results. I'm very, very happy with how close our orbit matches up to the orbits that we are being asked to achieve. And boom, with that, the Grumpnik is away. That's what I'm calling it, by the way. Grumpnik. Sputnik, Grumpnik, I dig it. We try and set up the things, the ScanSat or whatever. This is me looking through my long list of mods to see if we can try and find the ScanSat bit, but unfortunately it looks like we're in a little bit too high of an orbit to actually take advantage of the ScanSat functionality, even if we do aim it at the planet Gael, which kind of sucks. But hey-ho, we've at least got an awesome little self-powered craft up in the sky, which we can use to bounce signals off, which will allow for longer-range missions, or longer-ranged unmanned missions, so to speak, that we can now control from Gael. So really, really happy with that. And the fact that this is a polar orbit is really, really good for a satellite that is going to be bouncing a whole heck of a lot of signals. Anyway, it's time to come back to Gael. And, well, let's just say I didn't completely plan for this to happen. I planned to get this little module, this computer core, back to the planet's surface. I don't know why I planned this. It doesn't really matter. It's just a computer core, I suppose. But I wanted to try. But alas, we've run out of electric charge. And that unfortunately means that this core is not going to be meeting the friendliest of ends. We can't even jettison the heat shield. And it's all over. Just like that. Thanks for watching, ladies and gents. My name, of course, has been Over the Potato. This has been Kerbal Space Program, and I'll see you next time. Bye.